Nathalie Oziol, it was last week, first time since 1961 that a French prime minister had been ousted by a vote of no confidence in parliament. How's it gone down with constituents where you are in Montpellier?
Well, you must understand that the situation in France is that of a political, economic, and democratic crisis. So people are quite fed up with the situation because we are back to the situation we were in July, exactly the same situation. So Emmanuel Macron must appoint now a new government. And we are in the same situation just because he decided to dismiss the result of the snap elections he provoked, as president of the Republic in France. So the thing is, 63% of the people now in France want him out. And we agree, with my party, La France Insoumise, with the fact that he is the problem in France. Emmanuel Macron is the problem in France, and he must leave, he must resign. So now we are calling for early presidential elections because it is the only solution to the crisis in regime we are in. He decided he would not respect the elections. He decided to appoint a right-wing government in spite of the results of July the 7th. And then obviously this government was toppled because this government did not have a majority in the National Assembly to pass its budget bill. So enough is enough. Emmanuel Macron has done enough damage in France. It was not just Michel Barnier who was ousted. It was a message to Emmanuel Macron as well. And now he must leave.
But he said in the past week he's not going anywhere, and he doesn't have to. He's there till 2027. So how do you get that budget over the line?
Yes, so he said, but we will see, because we are not the only ones to point to Emmanuel Macron's responsibility in this situation. So now what will happen in the National Assembly is there will be what we call a special law, which will be examined on Monday. This special is just the bare minimum budget, which is necessary to have current affairs going on. But what we did for 3 months, what we have done with the new Popular Front, so the coalition of left-wing parties, is we proposed amendments to the budget bill presented by Michel Barnier, and we had a lot of them adopted and voted in Parliament. And these amendments, were a proposition in compromise. That's what life in Parliament is like. We proposed amendments, we proposed another orientation, another political line, and to make it clearer, what Michel Barnier did was to propose to cut expenses. But this has led to the deficit in the budget we have to deal with now. So what we propose instead is to raise receipts, for instance, by taxing what we call super profits, taxing multinational companies, taxing the richest fortunes in the country. What Michel Barnier did by using the 49.3 article of the Constitution is take these amendments and put them aside and just go on with the austerity budget bill he originally proposed. This is not a compromise.
It's not compromise. Denis Barranger, let me ask you, is there a point there that this was a moment after the result of the July 7th legislative elections where, on paper, the power had shifted from the presidential palace to the parliament? And you just heard there Nathalie Oziol saying there were amendments, there were things that were passed, and they were ignored. So are we in a crisis of democracy here?
I'm not sure we are yet. We're not in a very good situation. But what we have been taught by the last sequence over the months is that basically what we have now in France is a parliamentary system, very ordinary over Europe. So basically the president can withdraw on its 4 parties and a new coalition of parties to have a majority that can both oust oust the prime minister and have a new instead. So basically we're not in a crisis yet.
Except that other parliamentary democracies don't have this magic article of the Constitution, Article 49.3, which is effectively you turn a bill into a decree and a vote of no confidence.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I think now is the time for us to understand that in a parliamentary government, what you really need is a majority, a fully fledged majority in parliament. The president, if the president can do nothing about it, he has to, not to be ousted maybe, but he has to withdraw from the front line of French politics. It's for the party to agree among themselves. If
Isn't
not,
that what he did the other day when he spoke, President Macron, to the nation after the collapse of his government? He said, now it's over to you. And in fact, he's received at the Élysée Palace the members of not the extreme parties like La France Insoumise, France Unbowed, and the National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party, but in fact the socialists. And I have to say I differ with Madame Aziol in the fact that things have changed since July. Why? Because the left and the centre, the more moderate left, the ecologists and the socialists are willing to discuss with the president about the possibility of entering a government. And they're they've divided from Jean-Luc Mélenchon and the far left. So in fact, these calls for Macron to resign and have an early election, who are they coming from? They're coming from the two polar opposites, the France Unbowed and Marine Le Pen. They want an election now because if one was held, who would win? Marine Le Pen. She just went up in the surveys in the polls. Since the government collapsed, she'd do even better than at the last election. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, he'd do much worse.
Mark
How
Perlman.
do you know that? How do
we-
you know that? I mean, well, just to go back, because I would like to answer that. But first, well, France Unbowed is not an extreme party, but let's move on. In the last election, the snap elections, 27 polls out of 27 predicted Marine Le Pen's victory and her party, the National Rally, victory at the elections. Well, all 27 polls were wrong.
All right,
So, well, we don't know what would happen, and I claim that we could win these early presidential elections. And then, obviously, we did not go and talk with Emmanuel Macron because we did not expect anything from him. And if you listen to what the Greens and the Socialist Party and the Communist Party say, they say they were disappointed after these talks. Well, obviously they were, because there is nothing to be expected from Emmanuel Macron.
Now, last week's vote of no confidence had unintended consequences. A promised tax hike for the rich will have to wait. So will support for struggling farmers who last week ransacked or bricked off the constituency offices of MPs, like that of former socialist president François Hollande, who's now back in parliament. This is in Tulle, in the center of France. Mark Perlman, so we had this long period after the vote, where Emmanuel Macron took his time before picking a prime minister.
51 days.
Then we had this big preparation to try to get a budget over the line. It fails at the first hurdle. But in the last week, those protests that we've seen by those farmers, is that moving the needle at all? Is that going to help people to try to compromise?
Well, it's not so much the protests, because protests are very common here in France, and I don't think we're seeing a movement as big as we've seen in recent times. However, the pressure is coming from Emmanuel Macron's self-imposed deadline. He said 48 hours to the participants of that meeting. We're getting there. He's on his plane right now, supposedly landing in Paris from a shortened visit to Poland. You don't cut short a visit just to have dinner with your wife, I'm assuming. So let's hope that he does so because he wants to reveal the prime minister. If not, it would be a bit strange and rather impolite towards his Polish guest. But the pressure is coming from Europe, from jittery financial markets, and from public opinion. The public opinion, if you are the polls, they want to have a prime minister. They want to know where they're going, and also the pressure to get a budget. Yes, there will be a special law that will allow, as was said, the bare minimum, but a budget needs to be passed very early next year. It's already very unusual. So there is this pressure, and Emmanuel Macron also has the pressure of failing big time with Michel Barnier. I mean, he took 51 days, and Michel Barnier stayed in power 91 days, the shortest tenure. It was a major failure. So Emmanuel Macron is blaming other parties in parliament. He's blaming probably Michel Barnier maybe for not being up to the task. But he can also blame himself, and he will be blamed if this is another failure. It's also maybe why instead of appointing a prime minister within 24 hours, we're already a week later because it's proving to be very difficult to find the magic bullet.
So, Sean Skull, markets jittery, not too jittery though. The bond yields, yes, they've gone up a little bit. The cost of borrowing for the government has gone up slightly. But overall, there's not a sense of panic among markets. And there is some who say, well, yeah, Germany's got worse problems. And France, it's still governed. Even though there's no government, the president has so much power that they'll still manage to muddle through. Is France's democracy in any worse trouble than it was before?
I would say this is a particular situation because we have a parliament in France now that is divided in three blocks, sort of the left, the far right, and the center. So this makes it hard for to create a government. And this is something new in French democracy. But the Fifth Republic's institutions are very well made. So in that sense, that the president is elected by the people. And he's still in charge.
So this is gridlock, not a crisis.
Yeah, I would say gridlock, and the president, he can still. But the thing is, he now the president is like a British monarch. He's handling foreign affairs, he is handling defense issues, but he without the government, without the majority, he can't form a government. So it's more difficult to rule the country.
Yeah, and on that pie chart, there's one fewer member of the National Rally than there was a week ago. That's because of a by-election where the National Rally suffered a surprise loss. And there's again this sense, Denis Barranger, that maybe it's France will always muddle along. This democracy isn't in any worse shape than it was a week ago or 2 months ago or 6 months ago.
Yeah, well, we have a strong president, but we don't have a presidential government in the American way. So for some time, the president can muddle through, but he's not an American president. He needs a government. On the current affairs or caretaker government is not going to stay very long. So we have a parliamentary government. On the top of it, we have a strong president because of conventions of the Constitution. Apart from that, what we really need is a majority coalition in parliament.
And your piece is quite scathing. You talk about a presidentialist superego that continues to determine attitudes, a president who's weakened, but convinced that he can still stay at the center of the game.
But with a good psychoanalyst, you can do away with the superego. With a good constitution, you can do away with a president that has been too strong over time. Why is the president strong? Because people accept that he is. Now that we have a weak president, because Macron now is a weak president, because of the reason you had just said, he has to withdraw from frontline politics. On it's for a strong prime minister with a strong majority to take over.
And Ken, just one final question on this. Can the kind of parliamentary politics that Nathalie Oziol was talking about at the beginning, can the French do that? They haven't done that since 1958.
I agree. They need to change.
You don't see that change coming?
Not anytime soon, to be honest.
Emma Kate
I
Simons?
think, but there's been some movement, as I was saying
second that
before.
as well.
And also, but there's a game being played because during a big election like we had after the dissolution with the legislative elections, it was to the interest of the broader left to come together. But now the centre left, the socialists and the Greens, they want to be ministers. They want to be in the government. So they're willing to split with their former allies or their sometime allies on the far left. I mean, this is political expediency. We've seen it before, but so be it. If that means, like in other European countries, frankly, I think that the French always want the president to decide. Why can't they come together?
I think we have Mark Perlman with a spoiler alert. Go ahead.
Oh.
Yes, it's not going to be tonight, according to the Élysée Palace.
Oh, I thought you had the
So
name.
Emmanuel Macron's promises are not always delivered. That's a lesson we've learned, and we're learning the hard way again. The Élysée Palace telling reporters that the announcement should be tomorrow morning, Friday. So that's the new deadline we have. So no.
Again, is this par for the course?
I mean, obviously, this means that he hasn't decided, that he's coming back not to announce the government from this visit to Poland, but also
Why
to
not finish
consult.
the visit? It was just 2 or 3 hours more.
Because he probably needs to see people tonight. He needs to consult people. He still has, he's still testing names. The problem is that he needs to make sure he gets a pact of non-aggression, to speak in military terms. He's not going to get the right and the left to participate in a government. What he needs from them is to make sure they don't pull the trigger in the parliament, that is Article 49.3, and voting a motion of no confidence. He's trying to get the socialists away from this new popular front. They've already hinted that they don't see eye to eye anymore at all with Jean-Luc Mélenchon. There's been a rather public spat between Jean-Luc Mélenchon and Olivier Faure, the leader of the Socialist Party, but it doesn't mean that they found the right person, because the left is saying we want a prime minister from the left. The right says we don't agree. So he's still going to consult probably tonight, late into the night, like he likes to do. And hopefully we'll have a prime minister by tomorrow morning, but this is not a hard deadline with Emmanuel Macron.
Nathalie Ozia, let me ask you, because the leader of your party, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, has stated that he wants the platform that was adopted by this left-wing coalition between rounds of the snap elections to be applied. Just that platform, nothing other than that platform. That's a sort of a quote of what he said. At this point in time, a simple question: can France change? Can suddenly this parliamentary kind of, where you make deals, I'll give you something, you give me something back, like they do in neighboring Germany, where they spend weeks, sometimes months, coming up with the platform before they agree to go into government? Is that possible?
Well, we take this platform, this program, very seriously, because we, members of parliament from the New Popular Front, were elected on this basis. I was elected on this basis. And we said in this platform, and we say still now, that we are against and that we are opposing Macron's politics. So to give you a very clear example, we want to repeal, abolish the pension reform, which is one of the major points in Emmanuel Macron's term. He does not want to go back on this reform. What compromise is there to do with that? You cannot just find an in-between between a retirement age at 60 and a retirement age at 64. That doesn't exist. I was saying that Macron's politics has always been to cut expenses. We want to raise receipts. There is no in-between either. So I know it sounds like a detail now to want to respect our commitments, but it's not. I mean, people who were angry with the political sphere came and voted this time in July. You cannot start betraying them now. The hope the New Popular Front created cannot be betrayed now. Now, I would like to comment on the graph, the chart you showed on your screen, showing the distribution in seats. This platform has led to a victory of the New Popular Front. You can see that most seats, those of the New Popular Front. This means something. It means that there is a relative majority of the New Popular Front. And what used to be the rule between 2022 and 2024 has now changed. For what reason? Why would democratic rules change because Macron is just not happy with the result of the elections? This does not exist. You cannot do this in a sane democracy. So again, first possible solution, appoint a prime minister from the New Popular Front. That's what we have claimed ever since July the 7th. And I am being coherent with our pledges, with our commitments. Second of all, because Emmanuel Macron apparently is not determined to appoint a New Popular Front prime minister, well, he is the problem to this crisis and regime. So he must leave.
All right. Sean Skull, at this point in time, is it like this all the way to 2027?
Right now, I think the urgent matter is to because we're in December, there's no budget, no government. So the urgent matter now is to get a government. So I think he will appoint someone from the left or center to avoid socially voting.
Do you think he could appoint someone from the left?
Yeah, there's the names have been. We've heard the name of Bernard Cazeneuve, for example, but he could as well appoint
The
someone
former prime minister.
exactly under François Hollande. But he could as well appoint someone from the center, such as François Bayrou. It's another name we've heard, who could work with the left and the right and the center. And he could as well appoint someone from the right, such as Rotaillot, who might.
It's very right wing, though.
Yeah, but he'll be able to avoid a motion of censure from the Rassemblement National, as they are close on some issues such as immigration or.
But it can't continue like this. I mean, France just muddling along because with the debt problem, what have we got? We've got a deficit heading up towards 118% of GDP. And then obviously Macron is coming back from Poland. There's so much going on internationally that's absolutely urgent, whether it's the war helping Ukraine. Donald Trump's just been elected. There's Syria to deal with. And then why don't the members of the center and the left and the center right agree on a program? And then from that program, you can choose the prime minister like they do in other countries in Europe and have done for decades.
Let's cross to the presidential palace, and France 24's Clovis Casali is there. What Emma Kate Simons is proposing obviously can't happen in a flash. What we do now know, as was Mark Perlman was reporting for us earlier, is that there won't be an announcement from where you're standing, at least until Friday morning.
Absolutely. The Elysee Palace has announced that President Macron has landed here on national soil, but the name of the next prime minister will be disclosed tomorrow morning. Those are sources from the Elysee Palace, possibly the sign that President Macron still needs to talk to those involved, talk to the potential prime minister, the next prime minister of France. Still two names that keep coming up. Bernard Cazeneuve, former socialist prime minister under François Hollande, and François Bayrou, centrist figure, close ally of Emmanuel Macron. So, yes, the French leader shortened his trip in Poland. Everybody here thought that it would be so that he would arrive here on national soil, make an announcement through a statement before the 8 o'clock news bulletins here in France. It seems the French president needs a little more time before announcing officially who is France's next prime minister. As you were saying with your guest, the problem remains the same. He needs to find someone who gets some kind of majority at the national parliament, who won't suffer a vote of no confidence, and who can get a budget passed, who can get any kind of bill through. And it's a difficult task indeed, with all of France's political parties setting their own red lines. And then President Macron needs to make a decision, needs to find the suitable candidate, France's next prime minister, to take over from Michel Barnier.
Mark Perlman, we showed those angry farmers earlier. What's it going to take for the needle to move, if you're saying that's not what it's going to take?
For the farmers, you mean?
No, just in general, the French citizens. Right now, Christmas will become New Year and will still be...
Well, it seems now that the Elysee Palace has committed that the appointment will be tomorrow morning. So that's the only difference we had, because until then it was just Macron telling other members of a meeting that it would be by tonight. But obviously he's changing his mind all the time. I mean, there's a long list of people who were told by Emmanuel Macron, I will appoint you prime minister tomorrow morning, and end up not getting the call and not getting the nod. And so Emmanuel Macron has a whole night to probably change his mind several times. But clearly he has not decided, because there's no other reason for him to come back to the Elysee Palace, probably convene a meeting or spend his evening on the phone and try to make a decision by tomorrow morning. But the French want a response. I mean, clearly, some are calling, as we just heard, for him to resign. He said he won't do so. There's nothing obliging him to do so. And clearly, he will not do what Jean-Luc Mélenchon and Marine Le Pen want him to do. But he has to show that he can still appoint someone that is really his purview, the presidential purview. He is the only one deciding on the appointment of the prime minister, but this one needs to fly.
Could he try to have a same kind of person as Michel Barnier and have a second crack at it?
I don't see how this could work. It didn't work once. It was not only because of Michel Barnier, but it was more about the parliamentary situation. Well, as Emma Kate said, what has changed is really the socialists have started to move.
And why?
Because they feel that they disagree more and more with France unbowed, and they're maybe seeing that they don't want early elections again because they're not polling well. So they might decide that, okay, even if we don't totally agree, let's try to see if we can work together and maybe get some concessions from Emmanuel Macron. They need concessions. They need at least the pension reform to be suspended or amended. And if they get this, they could at least support the government.
Denis Barranger.
Frankly, I mean, tonight is a test of whether France will and can become a mature parliamentary democracy. And in a mature parliamentary democracy, it's not for the president to be a magician that comes up with a name. It's for parties to build a coalition and come up with the name of a prime minister. End of story.
And you heard earlier Nathalie Oziol saying the largest bloc coming out of the elections was the left, so why not give us a chance?
This is not a horse race. It's a building of a majority in parliament.
Because it was shy of a majority.
Then again, it's not a horse race. You have to build a majority in parliament. Short of that, nobody can be prime minister. And the president cannot come up like a magician with...
So whatever is announced Friday morning is doomed to fail because there won't be a...
Look at
it won't come from parliament.
Look at the conversation we've had today. We've been speaking about the president. We should speak about parties,
Yes.
about platforms, about concessions, on bargains, and about building coalitions. Short of that, we'll be in trouble for some time.
Yes, and the left has vetoed so many of the left-wing candidates who were put forward in the previous round for the Prime Minister after the July elections, such as Bernard Cazeneuve. He was hissed and booed by left-wing colleagues at a meeting, people from the France Unbowed. So I think if Macron is clever and appoints a centre-left Prime Minister who will really put the left in a hot spot, are they really going to reject a candidate from the left just because Jean-Luc Mélenchon and the people in La France Insoumise rejected someone from the centre left? I mean, it's over to them, isn't it, really?
All right, the cover of Time magazine, a reminder of changing political winds as December becomes January. Donald Trump, who's yet to return to the White House, but he already... has allies preparing for the sequel, what with Emmanuel Macron last Saturday inviting the U.S. president-elect to the reopening of Notre Dame. And you saw that bro shake that took place. Let me ask you, Sean Scull, when you think of Western liberal democracy, as it's existed since World War II, when you see that bro shake, is it the same as it's always been, or are we entering uncharted territory?
Oh, we're entering the era we had during Trump's first term. He was doing these handshakes already back then, and now with Trump coming back, we're going to see the return of real politics, a more pragmatic foreign policy, to the difference of maybe Biden's foreign policy that was maybe more...
But that's for the United States, but I'm talking more generally about democracy. How is democracy in France, in the U.S., in Germany going to fare now going forward?
It's we could say it's in crisis. We see it today. I mean, today we are in a crisis in the democracy.
Why?
Because in France we don't have any government, for example, right now.
What's the roots of these crises?
The root of the crisis, There are many in France, for example. I would say it's maybe the sociology of France has evolved, so maybe the institutions doesn't follow, and now we see that we have three main blocks in the parliament, and this is something the French institutions weren't created to handle.
It wasn't created to handle the fact that there could be three different kinds of blocks, because they're all from strains of.
In 1958, it was created in such a way. Up until De Gaulle has created the idea that there was fait majoritaire, meaning that Parliament was always supporting the president. Well, not anymore. And the president has to deal with that, and the parties have to deal with that, I think. But the constitution is okay, it's doing fine. You don't need to alter it. It will do the job nicely.
The Constitution will do the job nicely, Mark Proman?
Well, it should be flexible, but it's true. I mean, there is this notion that this was done in contrast to the Third and even more the Fourth Republic, obviously, because there was this instability, parliamentary system, governments were coming and going, and there was this system with a majority voting system and not a proportional system. And it was supposed to deliver a majority, and to a large extent, it worked. Yes, there were periods when there was a president from one camp and a prime minister from the other, but governments were staying for years, and there was political stability. What has changed is that the two mainstream parties have essentially vanished. The socialists have vanished, the conservatives have vanished, and we're seeing other parties emerge. France Unbowed, the National Rally has been on the rise for years, but they were generally dominated. They were really on the sidelines, and now this has changed. And so we find ourselves, even with this majority voting system, with a fractured parliament like you had under the Fourth Republic. And this is why it is difficult, including for a president, to navigate this, because he believes he still is the decider. And as was pointed out, he's not that person anymore.
Nathalie Oziol, the leader of your party, was once a member of the Socialist Party. He was in a socialist government. And how do you explain this what Mark is describing there, this splintering of politics? And it's not just France, it's the same in Britain, it's the same in Germany, it's the same in a lot of places. The Big Ten parties are no longer working. Why?
Well, you're right to say so, maybe because people's aspirations, people's expectations have evolved, because the regimes do not correspond and are not able to provide answers to these expectations any longer. For instance, with my political party, France Unbowed, La France Insoumise, we have been defending the idea of a sixth republic, meaning a change in constitution and an evolution in the institutions and the way people can take part in politics. This is for a reason. It's because there is I said that people have gotten disinterested in politics. Many people don't vote any longer. And so that this is a challenge for us. This means we have to find a way to involve people in the political in the political making, in the political process. Now, we cannot speak the same language if we do not agree on what is at stake here. I heard earlier, the point is to build coalitions and to make compromises. I disagree with that. The point is to respect the elections. I mean, you cannot just disregard the people's expression through the vote in July and now say that you have to find how to build another coalition. I mean, Michel Barnier's government was toppled because it was not a true representation of what people chose back in July. So if what Macron is trying to do,
but what they chose, we're not sure of. That's the Nathalie Oziol. Yes, the left had the largest bloc, but it was well shy of any kind of majority. It would have needed to reach out to somebody to get bills passed.
Well, what about Michel Barnier? He was supposed to be the solution with this coalition between Macron's political groups and the right, and it failed. and actually their alliance could not work from the beginning. So I don't believe in such strategies. They are doomed to fail. But the only goal is to respect the voice of the people. This is why, in my opinion, the only solution can be a democratic solution.
Right.
So there is no problem in
The
calling
voice of the
for
people was
early
actually
presidential
Marine Le Pen
elections.
in the first
It
round,
means calling
sadly.
for people to vote again. What is the problem with that?
One of the, and you heard Mark Perlman allude to it a moment ago, Emma Kate Simons, one of the proposals, and Michel Barnier said it was on his agenda, Emmanuel Macron said it was on his agenda back in 2017, that is proportional representation in votes for parliament instead of this two-round system, which turns every election for parliament into a mini presidential election.
Sure, I mean, that could help, but that's the kind of reform that can take years to actually get the support for and implement. So right now, France is in a crisis, as you said. It's an existential democratic crisis striking France, the United States, the United Kingdom, across the world. We've got extremism rising and polarization. We've got the influence of social media and interference in elections. France is subject to all of that. However, we do have in France this far left and far right party who are working together to be the parties of chaos. I write for Frontières, a French weekly. Caroline Forest, she said, these are the parties of chaos. They're the parties of clans. They're populists. And as Madame Oziel pointed out, they don't want to make coalitions. So the French want stability. Yes, they're edging towards a candidate like Marine Le Pen because she answers them on things like immigration and inflation, which are concerning people. People that can't afford to live like they lived before. They're worried about their jobs, their retirement. They're worried about everything. But I think that the answer is not in the extremes. And unfortunately, and as we also wrote in the New European, it's a Lewis Carroll style politics with this Tweedledum and Tweedledee. There's so much that's similar between the far left and the far right in France. The only things they don't agree on are perhaps Israel. No, they even agree on Israel most of the time. No, not on Israel, but they're on migration. But they're together on Syria, on Russia. They're together on this kind of
Right.
destruction.
But the discussion.
This is really your opinion, and this is based on nothing at all.
All right,
Because
we're running
first,
short on
as I
time.
said, well, you just classify us both as extreme parties. This is not just a classification like that you can invent. We are not an extreme party. We are not far left either. And then, to say, the no confidence motion was lodged by the NFP, just as we lodged a motion back in September, which the far right did not vote. Okay, so the fact that Barnier was able to present an austerity budget bill
A final
was
word on
because
this.
the far right allowed him to do so.
We're running short on
And
time.
Barnier
Nathalie Oziol,
tried to
I'm sorry, we're
negotiate
running
with
short
the
on
far
time. One final question, Denis Barranger. Can Emmanuel Macron change, or is it too late?
Oh my God. I think I'll pass on that. I don't think he will, but he should be forced by the parties and by parliament. Otherwise, he won't, I think.
The pressure can be applied.
I would hope so. Time will tell.
All right, time will indeed tell. Maybe we'll know more Friday morning. I want to thank you, Denis Barranger. I want to thank as well Emma Kate Simons, Sean Scull, Mark Perlman. I want to thank as well Nathalie Oziol for joining us from Montpellier. Thank you for being with us here.